All
Awesome.
right, we're live. Thanks for joining everybody for this very, very special webinar. We're joined today by the incredible Miss Lego, Marcella Araica. We'll be talking about mixing and production and hopefully answer a lot of your questions. Thanks for joining us, Marcella.
Of
Thank you
course,
so
it's
much.
my pleasure. Of course. Anything I can do to kind of, I guess, ease our time during this process, right? It's a very difficult time for the entire world. So if we can all just kind of unite and help one another, whether that's in you guys having questions for audio or just, I don't know, wanting to pass time and want to talk to somebody outside of your own circle, right? So I guess we will start. I have a few questions that have already been submitted, which has been amazing. And I will start. Let's see. My first question comes from Francesco Genduso. And I apologize, everyone, if I am misspelling or mispronouncing your name. I'm trying my best. I know we're people from all around the world. So Francesco says, hey, what's your favorite mix bus compressor? Do you usually EQ before or after the compressor on the mix bus? So my favorite mix bus compressor, honestly, in my studio, I have an SSL 9000J. And I love the compressor that's on the board. I mean, that compressor alone, it's amazing. So I usually use anywhere between the SSL compressor or I patch out to the Neve 33609. I definitely play around with different things, but if I'm also mixing in the box, like if I'm mixing at home or whatnot, I like to use the Ozone 8, which I know the Ozone 9 just dropped, but I haven't really trickled too much into that. So the Ozone 8 and one of the Mic DSP, the ML 4000, is what I usually like to put on there. Let's see. Oh, and if I EQ before, no, I usually EQ after. That's just sort of like the finishing finesse that I like to put on to make sure, anything that's kind of needed, I either like to add or just take away. So I'll just EQ mainly after the compressor on the mix bus. Another hard name. Fees Hooks. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Your three main tricks to make a perfect mix. It's funny because everybody talks about, oh, what are your tricks? What are your this? There are certain little tricks. And let me think. So definitely I use. I'm an avid user of distortion. I use distortion on pretty like everything. Anything, not everything, but what I'm saying is like everything from maybe my kick drums, my vocals, certain instruments, guitars, obviously guitars, but like sometimes distortion is just always such a great tool to kind of bring sounds, vocals forward, bringing a lot of the harmonics out that you may struggle with maybe trying to bring out with EQing. So definitely distortion. Let's see, what other trick do I use? I wish I had these questions beforehand. I may have to come back to this one because I have to think. Because I don't really know if I consider them tricks. It's just sort of like little things that I do, and I'm just not really able to think right now. So I will come back to you. I promise. Oh gosh, and the next person is like, I like to increase that quantity to 5 tricks. You guys are really challenging me on the tricks. All right, let me think about the tricks, and I promise you before the hour's over, I got you. Let's see, Emmanuel, if we were able to ask already, Marcella, as we know, Nate has been working on the new JT album with Rob Knox and supposedly Timbo. Are you involved in the process too? I am not involved in that process. As of right now, they've been strictly recording. And JT has his own team of engineer that he's been using, who's an amazing engineer. I don't remember this. So he's been using Chris. He's been using Chris for the last few albums. So that's like, no, that's his team. And, Danger goes out and they just sort of work together all in one room. So the need for another engineer is not there. Now, would I like to be involved in the mix process? Absolutely. We're not there in the stage yet. I'm not, we don't know. So stay tuned. Emmanuel, again, I just wondered in case it's likely JT is about to get back to the old gold team for album making. He's put together a really, really dope team of people. And a lot of gold members. So, again, stay tuned. Can't give away too much. Chris Adelman, what is your vocal chain for backup singers? I'm thinking I'm gonna read that question as background vocals. I think that's a background vocal chain for background vocals. Anything from a DBX 160 to the 1176, or again, my handy dandy Neve 33609 compressor. Those are excellent for background vocals. I know your question asked me vocal chain for backup singers, but I'm not really computing that other than background singers. So yeah, that's what I would use as far as a vocal chain. And vocal chain. Okay, so microphone. I would probably use a C800, a Elam 251, or the Neumann U87, and any of the Neve mic pre's would be 1073 or 81, which is what I have in the studio, to a CL1B compressor. So let me back this up. If you're asking me about the vocal chain that I use for background singers or whatever, a lot of times the artist is the background singer or maybe the songwriter. But if I'm going to use a chain, it's going to be the microphone choices will be the Neumann U87, the Sony C800, or the Elam 251 microphone, which is a super expensive microphone. I think it runs around $10,000. So if you get your hands on one, they're pretty amazing. And then I'll go through the Neve 1073, 1081 mic preamp. And then I'll go into the CL1B compressor. So CL1B, a lot of you guys, if you guys know a lot of my interviews, a lot of this stuff is like gear that I've been using throughout my entire career, and none of it has failed me or has, ever just not sounded great. So I'm going to continue using what feels good, sounds good. And these are sort of the options that I use. Next person. Jaquota Sadoska. Hello, and thanks for doing this. What's your female vocal chain? Does it change a lot depending on vocal types? Okay, great question. I get this question quite a bit. I don't really have a female-male vocal chain. Now, the question, does it change a lot depending on the type of vocal? Yes, it does. There's different types of vocals, correct? Like, I may get a vocal that may not be super full in range, in just density. So I tend to want to use more warmer mic pre's at that time. So again, using a 1081, a 1073, Neve 1081, 873, into usually a tube compressor, which is why I use the CL1B. Now, what I have found is when I get a vocalist that has more of a gritty, low-toned vocal, though that particular chain that I use regularly tends to bring a little bit too much warmth or even basically a thickness to the voice that kind of gives it too much mid-range. So what I have found is using a mic pre like the Avalon 737 or the API 512C mic pre into the CL1B kind of gives that clarity. Now it also depends on the microphone. I like, with darker, grittier, deeper voices, I like using the CL1B or the U87. But if I'm using a vocal that needs a little bit more presence, I like to use the CL1B or the Elam 251. So, a lot of this is trial and error. If you don't have those microphones around, anything, I'm trying to think what else I could use. I mean, those are basically the 3 mics that I use. And then, obviously, if you need like a scratch microphone just to kind of do like some demo vocals, you can use, something as simple as a SM51, which is from Shure, or a Shure SM7 microphone, which is actually a broadcast microphone, but it sounds pretty cool and get a good sound out of it, like warmth sound. So Emmanuel again, no, not Emmanuel. I'm sorry, Dr. Bulab. Vocal chains are prime. Yes, they are. Very much so. Fabrizio Rabacci. Hi from Italy. Hi, and I hope you guys are doing okay over there. Any business advice and how to improve? Well, I wish this question was a little bit more detailed. So, any business advice? I mean, as far as in the music business, know who the players are. As far as when you're working on a project, know exactly who the go-to person is to speak to. That can be anyone from an artist manager. It could be a label representative like an A&R, or someone in the label system. Obviously, you don't want to talk to like like the janitor, but just making sure what everybody's role is when you're in a project. Because when it comes down to like, approving and making things, come to fruition, like, if you need a mix approved or you have a question, you want to talk to the right person, because if you talk to the wrong person and they give you one answer and then you turn in something else, then it becomes too many cooks in the kitchen, and you got to be really aware and just avoid that by all means, because, something that can take a short amount of time can really stretch a lot longer, and time is money, right? We gotta be, mindful of our work. You know what I mean? Like, we have to be mindful of our time. A lot of us, we may have back-to-back projects, and we don't have the luxury of staying and working on a project or on a song for 4 or 5 days, because you have other work that's coming in or that you have to get done. So, just be really mindful. And also, the reason why you should know your players is because you got to know your credits. You should be able to know who is the right person for you to get your credits, right? We all work off of our credits. That's sort of our resume. So you have to build your resume the right way. So, the best business advice. Also, when you're collecting money, don't forget taxes. Taxes are very important. Don't accept a, $900 check and not put some of that money to the side. About 30% of that money should be, give or take, put into an account in escrow. So when it comes time for doing your taxes, you are able to pay it back, and you're not getting, hit with a bill of, thousands of dollars. And now you don't have any money of where that's coming from. So very important that you understand that when you get money, that you handle it the right way. A $900 check is not a $900 check. You have to subtract, what you think your percentage in taxes would be. And my rule of thumb is somewhere between 30 and 33%. Question to Marcella. Oh, Dr. Bulab again. What's your frequently used template setup consist of? Favorite plugin or VST manufacturer? Okay, so template. I have a very basic template. When I'm recording, it's super basic. I literally just create, an aux track. A lot of artists, or writers are using auto-tune. So, I automatically create an aux track that's going to bust the vocal chain right through the auto-tune. Now, if they request that you don't want it, you just bypass it, turn it off. You don't need it. No harm done. So that's the first part of the template. The other aux that I set up is a like a vocal bus. I try to set up maybe about 2 or 3 of them, but I usually just work off of one of them. But that busing is all the audio tracks are bused to this one bus, right? And as you're recording on this bus, I'll have something as simple as a compressor, some EQ. I'll set up all my sends on there. So, any effects that I have, I set up the sends, bus 1 and 2, bus 3 and 4, super basic. And at the end of that, I'll have like 3 or 4 auxes set up for effects. So I usually do about 2 verbs, 2 delays. I might do like what I call a Lago effect, which is like a stew. You know what I mean? Like you make in the kitchen, but it's a stew of effects. So what I do is just sort of like play around. I kind of put a couple things on there, and as the song is sort of playing itself out, then I'll start to kind of bring those in. It could be anything from like a phaser to some distortion, some saturation. It really doesn't, there's no give or take. I just sort of kind of put a bunch of little mixture of things together, and if I need it, great. If not, it's there. But my delays are always going to be somewhere around like a plate and a hall. I love plates. I love using plates for verbs. And then my delays, I usually probably set them originally at like a 1/4 and an 1/8 delay. Just in case the artist asks you like, hey, can you throw a delay on this? All you have to do is just put the send up. You don't have to sit there and search it and do all of the settings. Everything is there. Super basic. That's what you love when artists, producers love that when you're recording, because you can become super fast. When it comes to the mixing, I don't necessarily have a template, because I treat every mix, every song, it has its own individual ID. Unless I am, even if I'm like, I recently worked on an album or an EP for a band, and even with using doing an entire EP, I still don't want every single song to sound the same way in effects. So I might play around with different effects and using sort of the same aux effects template. But when I'm mixing, I don't really have a template. I just sort of every session is different, so it's really hard for me, and particularly, well, not hard, but it's just I like to kind of give it its own ID. So when I open a session for the first time, I'm looking at it, I'm organizing it the way. I will tell you this though, I guess a template when I'm mixing, one thing that I do is I set up the session in order of the song. So starting with the music, I always start with like any bass subs will be at the top, and then I go into like kick, snare, hi-hat, sort of in order of drum kit by the way that you would set it up in drummer perspective, and then I kind of move in into the other instruments that are in the song. If one instrument is playing through the entire track, like let's say like an arpeggiator, then that's going to be the instrument that's going to live underneath all the drums, because that's sort of like a main. To me, I know when looking at the session, if it's sitting closer to the top, it's a main instrument. So a lot of the main instruments will start sitting at the top, right after the drums will be sitting right there, and then I kind of create an order of where the instruments are coming in, whether it's in the chorus or in the pre-chorus or in the bridge. And the same thing goes with vocals, right? When I set up a session, the vocals and if there's any intro vocals, I'll kind of put that first after the instruments. And then I go into the verse vocals, and then I go into the pre-hook, and then I go into the chorus, and then I go into the bridge. But when I look at the session, I'm basically able to see the session in song order. And I can later today, if you guys want, I'll take a snapshot of one of my sessions to show you exactly, and I'll put it up on my story so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about on how I put things in order. And that's, if there is a template, it would be kind of putting everything in that order and sort of in song format. So I can definitely do that after we get off of here. Is I'll just snapshot a couple of my sessions and put a couple notes, and you guys can look at it, and we can talk more about that if you have any more questions. And also my favorite plugin. Gosh, I have so many. I don't have one. I love a lot of what's going on out there. A lot of the wave stuff, just basic wave stuff that I love. I love everything UAD. There's a lot. I don't have a favorite. It's like asking me what my favorite music is. I don't really have one. I love a lot of music, except I don't like heavy metal, death metal. I don't like that. I don't understand it. That's why. Hi, Marcella. I'm Xu from Cyprus. Wow. My question is, how do you approach a mix from a kind of music that you don't know? Great question. Approaching a mix from a type of music that I don't know is doing the research. Is going out there and listening to types of music in that genre and understanding where everything is sort of sounding, sitting, the feel of it all. You have to familiarize yourself with music that, if you don't know that type of music, kind of have to familiarize with it. If it's, like right now, I'm actually working on a project for an artist out in the Middle East. And although the music has a lot of hip hop influences and like sort of dance influences as well, there's also a lot of instrumentation being used in these mixes that are instruments of, from the Middle East. And, you sort of have to understand what those sounds are and where they're supposed to sit. So just kind of really familiarizing yourself and listening to other music. And you can do that now. It's so easy. I mean, literally, like I can go on Spotify and just type in like Middle Eastern music or music from, Cyprus, whatever. Things will come up. You know what I mean? You can kind of do your research like that. So, it's interesting. Julio Garzon, how do you get your vocals so warm but so crispy? It just depends. A lot of it will depend on what the recording sounds like, right? So this question can come from how do you get your vocals so warm and so crispy? So kind of what I talked about, if you're on the recording side, is really finding a vocal chain that really works for you and for the singer. So really understanding the characteristics of all the outboard gear that's out there, and really trial and error. You have to kind of use it, learn it. Does it work for you? Do you like the sound? So it begins in the recording. And then on the mix side, I love, to me, very warm sounding vocals. But if you do things too warm, then you have a hard time kind of understanding them. So adding crisp to it is really just, making sure that you don't have too much of a certain frequency being boosted in that vocal. So you either have to take out some, and that's usually somewhere between, I would say, about 250 to 600 that you have to kind of look at, to kind of take away. And then I would boost anywhere in like the 2 up to 10K to kind of give it some of that clarity and crispiness to it. Hold on one second. Okay. So Vaso, hello. Hi to you too. And Antonin, we all need a new Daft Punk album during this time. I agree. Benja Mendez, let's go. Let's do it. One second. I think I just scrolled up too much, so give me a second. Man, there's more. Okay, hold on. I think I scrolled up way too much. Okay. Thanks to the Mix of the Masters. Yes. Question, Marcella. How do you approach reaching out to people you would like to collaborate with? What are some tips when reaching out through email? Thanks, full self represent. And this is from FMVC Sings. Okay, how do I reaching out to people? Honestly, this business is built off networking. You have to be able to know how to network. So, how do you network? Well, you take one connection and you see if that connection can make the next connection if you don't have that connection. So, for me, if I want to reach out to working with like The Weekend, right? I would need to figure out like, okay, who in my circle, who in my world, in my universe, can I reach out to see who the best person is to reach out so that I can try to see if I can have a collaboration with The Weekend. That's one way to do it. You know what I mean? And that's why it's important when I go out and I speak to students. I always talk about network. They always ask me, how important is networking? Networking is probably one of the most important parts of this business, because we work in a business that's not necessarily, it's a freelance business, or you may be working for a company, but you have your resources within that company, but you also need resources outside that company, right? And you can only do that if you know people and network with them. So how do you find some of these people if you don't know them whatsoever? Well, the internet is at our fingertips. You can attempt that way. If you are lucky enough to get an email of somebody, what are some tips about reaching out through email? Keep it short. I can't stress enough to people that write me emails and they're so long. People, I have, it's not that I don't want to answer you back. It's not, but I have a lot going on besides work. I'm a mom. I have businesses. There's a lot. So if I'm getting emails from people and they are giving me a life story, I'm probably only going to read about 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 sentences tops. So figure out what your verbiage is going to be, right? And keep it short. Get to the point quickly. I would also recommend that if you're going to address somebody, know through email, know how to spell their name, because that's a huge pet peeve of mine, that my name is all over the internet, but when you want to write to me, then I have a couple of letters missing in my name. That drives me nuts. There's no reason for, people not to proofread their own work in their own emails. So make sure things are professional. And keep it short. Keep it short, please. Like, you got to get to the point. People don't, and it's not just me. It's not just me. People don't have time, and people have very short attention spans. So you got to keep things very short. Okay. Hope that was helpful. Emmanuel, I think again, Ms. Lago, we know you as a sound engineer, but have you ever tried to compose your own tracks? Yes, and it's tragic. Composing my own tracks is tragedy. I know what I'm good at, and I stick to it. So that's kind of what it is. I did. Listen, I actually started out before I became like full-blown engineer. I was really, I was producing. I had, I mean, this was back when I had like an MPC 2000. Like, I was making beats. I was all thinking I was the shit, But anytime I would hear other people's stuff, or I would play my stuff, I could already feel like the air being let out of the room. It's kind of like an air coming out of the balloon. Like, it's just like flat, like no response. So you know what? I give it to those that compose, that produce, and can do it. It's just tragedy for me. Okay, Clinton, ubiquity. What's your approach philosophy when tackling the low mids? How to balance the not too boomy with not too light. What's your approach philosophy to tackling low mids? Okay, so low mids, it's really, you got to be really careful with it, especially when you're dealing with a lot of the music that I work on, hip hop, even R&B, everything has this low end ghost frequencies per se, right? Because a lot of the stuff can be, you use subs that are so low, that are literally probably, transmitting around 30 to 40 hertz, which is very, very low. And then you have some basses and synth basses that are, you know, somewhere around the, you know, 160, 180 to 300, and, you know, everything else in between. So you kind of need to just understand the purposes of each instrument, you know? And really my philosophy is really that is, all right, you know, if I have you know, a like a bass, like a sub bass, and I also have like a power kick that's wide and big, I need to understand, you know, if my sub bass or my synth bass is really the groove of the track, like what is really what it is, you know, is the kick supporting the bass or is the bass supporting the kick, and really understanding where everything is sitting in the mix. Because what, you know, over the years, like, and listen, I've been doing this 20 years, basically almost 20 years, right? um and I am a constant student at this. Like, I love to constantly evolve and build and learn. And, you know, over the years, a lot of things that have changed, have shifted. A lot of, there was, you know, there was times where the kick was the kick, and then there was this underlying bass line that, you know, could kind of support the kick. But now a lot of the times it's sort of like the subs and the basses are what's really the prominent part of the record. You know what I mean? So you really have to understand what the character is, and, you know, from there you kind of play around in those frequencies. You try not to boost and allow these instruments to live in the same territory, in the same frequencies, because if not, it's all going to collide, and it's just not. It's all going to sound like one big muddy mess. You got to be really careful. Now, I will give you, you know, one trick that I do like to use when it comes to using frequencies, when it comes to like kick drums and even sometimes some basses. You have to kind of play around with it. But I like to add like really high frequencies on like kicks, you know, really high frequencies, even as high as like 10 hertz, believe it or not, because it really kind of brings out that attack that I'm looking for in a kick. So, you know, it's not all, you know, always, oh, it's a low instrument and I'm just going to be boosting or taking, you know, in the low and low mids. No, like, play around and see what happens when you add some high mids or even high frequencies to certain instruments, and you'd be amazed at some of the, you know, some of the characters that will come out of that sound. Boo, 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 boo. Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Any tips in dealing in how to place instruments in the song? Depth. What kind of tools do you suggest? Okay. So tips in like dealing with how to place instruments in song. Um, a lot of times it comes, I know exactly where the instrument's going to lie, right? And those are the easy ones. And a lot of us do. Like, we'll be like, oh, we know. A lot of times I don't. And it may be, you know, as simple as you got to do everything one by one. Okay. When you're dealing with all these, as a mixer, you have all these multi-parts. Okay. And the mistake that I usually see with young mixers that are learning their craft is they'll have everything going. Oh, sorry, 1 second. My FaceTime, 1 second. Jesus, that scared the shit out of me. Online. Okay, sorry guys. All right, so I just lost everything here. 1 second. Shit. Did I lose? Where is my Skype? Oh, shit. Ah. Okay, boom. I lost everything. When I had a phone call that came in, and I apologize. I don't know if I'm still on. Shit. Okay. Yes, I'm on. Okay. Sorry. I had a phone call that came in and it literally wiped my entire screen away, so I apologize. And I was at the question of, I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, yes, tips. Okay. So one mistake that I always see with young mixers is they'll try to mix everything all at once, right? And it's like chaos. Like if you're trying to, mix an entire song and you got every element going, like how are you supposed to know where everything is? So literally, take everything one by one. Build your mix out one instrument at a time, okay? And it doesn't mean that where let's say like you start with the kick and snare. Great. You like where the kick and snare is at. Now bring in maybe the hi-hat. Bring in the hi-hat. Okay, great. Now maybe bring in, let's say there's an arpeggiator. Bring in the arpeggiator, right? Because if that's like a main sound, bring that in. Start bringing it into where you like it in comparison to where the kick and the snare is at. And it doesn't mean that you're married to it being there. It just means this is a great starting point. And do that with every single instrument, one by one. Just start bringing everything in, bringing everything in, bringing everything in. Now, at some point, you might be starting bringing every element in, right, into the mix. And then all of a sudden, like everything now sounds like it's too much. Oh, I can't hear. Well, then kind of start taking things away. Don't start over. Just sort of mute certain instruments that you feel like are poking out too much, okay? And bring it back in and see where it feels like. Now, at that point, you have to make a decision. Is this a volume thing? Is this, I need more presence. Or this sound has just too much dynamic. I need to kind of compress it and kind of bring it more, so it's not jumping around all over the place. Do I need to EQ it? It's just hiding in the track. I want it to come out more. And you really have to deal with, instruments one by one. And that way you start building your mix out. What else? As far as tools for depth, I love using anything that creates space. So, it could be anything from Pan Man. I think that's Sound Toys. I like making things move because it creates a space. Not everything needs to live up the middle. Not everything needs to be hard left, hard right. We have an entire spectrum that we can use. So, everything from like a Pan Man or Mondo Mod or an Imager or Width or what is the other stuff that I like using? Ozone has, or is it Isotope? It's one of those. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. Has an Imager tool on there. So those kind of tools really create depth. It kind of brings sounds to move in places that you probably can't use just using regular pan knobs. So yeah, that's what I like to use. Oh, and then also I like using with vocals, a great tool that I love using is the RVox compressor. When I want presence, when I want, bring some depth to the vocals, trying to bring that in. And also on instruments, I like using the Renaissance Axe, which is similar to the RVox. I love using those on like guitars to kind of bring them forward. But yeah, that's my thing. How do you set up your whiteboard? What are you talking about? Pat Hundley, how do you set up your whiteboard? I'm a little confused. Can you maybe ask me again? I don't really know what you mean. I have an idea, but I'm not really sure. So if you can write me. Hernie Mix. Hi, Marcella. Thanks for doing this. We met last year in New York. You're a really kind person and amazing engineer. Could you talk a little bit about your workflow? My workflow, I think I kind of touched on it. If you want to know what a day in when I come into the studio to work on a mix, I will listen down to the song several times, kind of understand what the song is and where I think I want to take it. I'm hearing for things that I need to fix, correct, whether that's in pitch, if that's in editing. I do everything that has to do with time-consuming, non-creative in the beginning. It's the least part of my job that I like to do. because it just sometimes it can take a lot of time, and I can't even dive into mixing a record until things are right. So I literally spend that time. I'll listen down to the song several times, and then I will, correct whatever I need to correct, edit what I need to correct, and then kind of what I talked about earlier in the chat is the session is I create the way I want the session to look. So starting with basses and anything in that low frequency region will live at the top, followed by the drums, followed by instruments. Main instruments that are playing more often in the song will live more at the top of the instrument portion of my session. And then my vocals are going to be in order of the song. So starting from intro vocals, if there's any, to verse, pre-hook, if any, chorus, bridge, and so forth. And I promise you guys, I will put it on my story later, just if anybody wants to look at exactly what I'm talking about. I wish there was a way I could do it on here, but I don't know how to. Let's see. How do you, Hernie Mix, again, how do you organize your tracks? I just talked about that. How many hours you work per day, and how do you back up your session? Thanks a lot, and stay safe. And you too, stay safe. I just talked about organizing my tracks, and I'll show you guys a picture of that on my story after we hang up. I work many different hours. I usually try to work about 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours. Because I am a mom, I don't have luxury of working like I used to. I used to literally put in as many hours as I wanted. It could have been 16, 20 hours a day. You know what I mean? I would just be in the studio all the time. But I do have a 5-year-old that needs my love and attention. So I, try to work hours that don't interfere with my family life per se. Sometimes doesn't really work that way. If I have to, I work very long hours, but generally I work between 8 to 10 hours per day. And I back up my sessions, hard drive. These little hard drives are key. I have multiple hard drives. I have backups on backups. I don't like to put stuff on clouds and things like that. I'm very precious, and I am like top security when it comes to our files. So everything's on hard drives, and I back up on multiple hard drives. And our hard drive, yeah. So that's kind of it. Let's see, Dr. Bulab, you have worked with Mary J and Jay-Z. What is the different approach between R&B and hip hop versus pop mixed vocal chains? Well, I mean, so yes, I've worked with Mary J and Jay-Z. The difference between them is really just like, it's not really a big difference, and not even like the tools that you're using. It's really about the quantity. Like, to be honest, like R&B sessions have a bunch of vocals because obviously singers like to sing and stack and harmonize, and depending on who it is, and whoever's producing them, it can be 100 and over 150 tracks of vocals in a session. A lot of times when it comes to hip hop vocals, it's literally just a lead, maybe a dub track, and maybe some ad libs. It's super easy. The vocal chains essentially are the same. How you use them is really how things are recorded. You know what I mean? If things are not recorded great, I might have to use a couple things on my vocal chain. If things are recorded awesome, then it's just as simple as getting a compressor and EQ on there, and working it out. So yeah, and pop vocals, it's the same thing. when it comes to pop music, everything, I would say this about pop music, they love everything bright. They love everything bright. And now where music is, um, a lot of the music now that I'm mixing in the pop genre, they want everything muted. Like, oh, we want the vocals, basically like no effects. Like they want that like Billie Eilish sound, where everything is just muted and gated. It's just, it's just like, I like to call it like sticky vocals, because they're just like stuck. So when it comes to R&B, they're like, they love their vocals to swim, right? They love their vocals to be all in the delays and in the reverbs. And then hip hop, depending on who the artist is, it's very minimal, right? It's very minimal. Just maybe a little bit of some verb to kind of give it some dimension. Maybe some dope little delays on certain words. So yeah, it's just kind of really figuring out what the artist likes and who the artist is. And if it's like an artist like Mary J and Jay-Z, you kind of already have an idea what their sound is, right? So you don't want to really differentiate yourself so far off of what that sound is, because I mean they've got like over dozens and albums out and hundreds of musical compositions out, so that's easy. Ahmad Sharif. Hi Marcella, what is your go-to vocal chain for modern rap vocals? I'm guessing this is a recording question. It's vocal chain. So I talked about this earlier. For rap vocals, so easy. I mean, it's literally for rap music. Literally, I just use the U87. I can use the API 512C mic pre, Avalon 737, and I use these guys because it's what I have in my studio. And I also have the Neve, so I can use the Neve as well. So these are the things that I have in my studio. So this is what I use. And then the CL1B was always going to be in my chain as a vocal chain compressor. That's, maybe I might use an 1176 from time to time. If I, or the 160X compressor, I might use that as well. Haven't gotten my hands on a distressor, but if I do, and I bring it into the studio, that would probably be incorporated on my vocals. I do like using the distressor. Let's see. Gag sing music. How do you manage the business side with your creative side? And can you elaborate on how you're able to not let your business aspect of things affect your creativity? So how do I manage my business side with my creative side? Well, when I'm in creative mode, I don't deal with my business, because if I'm trying to be creative, if I'm being in my creative mode, I really try to, like, my phone goes away from me. I don't want the distraction of my phone ringing, of people texting me, of the urge of me wanting to check on what the latest thing on Instagram. I literally just try to get myself into a bubble. And I deal with business at a certain time of the day. I am an early bird. I wake up as early as 5:45 in the morning. I like to, take care of myself, work out, do what I have to do, kind of plan my day out. And I like to deal with my business side of things, if I can possibly, in the morning, anywhere between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., right? And after 2 p.m. is my time to be in the studio. And I like to be in the studio from about 2 to 10 o'clock at night, anywhere between 2 p.m. and midnight, sometimes at the latest. So, yeah, it just depends. Am I always able to not, do I handle business sometime at 6 p.m. at night? Yeah, I might have to. But how I try to manage it is like that. I try to separate the two. And that's how I don't allow it to affect my creativity, is you kind of put it away. Obviously things have to happen. You can't just step away from your phone. I don't step away from my phone from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. No. But when I'm in that bubble of trying to create and create, mix and create a sound and do what I need to do, I literally just put the phone away. I create all any distractions that I have around me needs to be in a different place. So that's how I manage that. Mix by Rob. Do you have a standard mix bus plug-in chain that you use when you're using inside the box? Ozone. Oh, yeah. Oh, besides, no. I mean, other than that, like I use either with Ozone, I use that, and I'll kind of use the EQ inside of there as well, or I'll use the what's the EQ that I'm the fab filter on EQ. Maybe I might even add like an L2 at the end if I need it. If I just feel like I just don't have it, I kind of want a little, I have some more headroom and I can bring something up. But that's basically it. I use the Ozone, the ML4000, and then the fab filter EQ after it, and yeah, that's it. Dr. Bulab, Marcella, how do you clarify your mixed translation through smaller speaker references? So I basically, I clarify, how do you clarify your mixed translation through smaller speaker references? So, I mean, listen, I use several speakers. I'm actually at home right now, and in my studio, I have Auratones, I have my iLouds, and I have these Yamaha HS7s. And, whenever I get down to the, the Auratones, I feel like if I can hear almost every instrument on those Auratones, I'm in a great place. Now, what I'll do is I'll print a version of the mix, and then I start listening to it on my headphones. If I go down to the car, and I kind of, as long as once I start feeling comfortable on those smaller speakers, I print the mix and I start hearing it in other places. And if it's translating all pretty much in the same place, like one sound isn't really poking out or one sound isn't too low, then I feel like I'm, pretty much at the end of my mix. So that's sort of how I do that. If I'm in the studio, I'm working on NS10s though. I'm working on NS10s and Barefoots. Well, you guys know that. You guys have seen my studio. So the Barefoots have, a couple of different EQ settings on there. And I work either on the cube setting or the flat setting. So the cube setting is basically like basically like an Auratone. But I do, the Auratones are here at my house, and then at the studio I use the cube. And yeah, so that's kind of how I just have to, if I can listen, on the smaller speakers, don't expect you to hear this like crazy bottom end. You know what I mean? But if you can sort of hear the translation of what the kick is supposed to be at, and those basses, and, sometimes some speakers don't even translate at all, so you need to kind of take it outside of maybe, and listen to it somewhere else on your headphones and on your, in your car, on your AirPods. It doesn't matter. So just use multiple references when it comes to your monitors and your speakers. Oliver Arston, hi Marcella, thanks for doing this amazing work you did with MIA. How much do you use plugins for reverb? What's your favorite? How much do you use plugins for reverb? I usually have about 2 to 3 reverbs in my sessions, depending. My favorite reverb that I'm using right now is Valhalla plate reverb. But anything really in the Valhalla family, I love. I think they just sound amazing. Another reverb that I like to use is the UAD EMT. Man, I'm having is it the 140? Sorry, the EMT 140 reverb. A lot of great settings on there for you to kind of create a really dope sound. So, those are pretty consistent in a lot of my mixes. What are we talking about? Okay. Mixed Girl Productions. Hey Marcella, thanks so much for doing this. What style of music have you enjoyed mixing that is out of your norm? Ashley, hey, I like that question. Out of my norm, I love, I mean, I love like working on like, so there's a project that was just, I worked on with a band called Be in the Hive, and working on that kind of music. It's an indie band. They're awesome. If you guys can reach them, look them up. They're amazing. They have kind of Arcade Fire type sound. They are just very different from a lot of the music that I work on. Lots of live instrumentation mixed with synthetic sounds, and that's I guess I just like the music that's just different. That's not like a copycat version of what's going on out there. I love country music. It's not something that I mix a lot of, but I have. But um, that's the style of music that I do like doing. I like doing any kind of music that's really just different. And like I said, like now I'm mixing a project that's from artists that are from the Middle East, and lots of different instruments that I'm not used to working with and mixing. So just kind of discovering and having my hands on manipulating those sounds and those instruments has been really awesome. Hi, Marcella. Thanks for the webinar. Greetings from Brazil. Hello, LF Vieira. Just got. Marcella, how much would you say your training at Full Sail prepared you for being a professional engineer? So Full Sail was amazing. What Full Sail gave me was a great foundation. I went to Full Sail not knowing anything about engineering. A complete ground zero student, learning everything there is to know about what it takes to engineer music. And they gave me a great foundation. Now, I got my internship out of Full Sail about 2.5, 3 weeks after I graduated Full Sail. So I was able to work in a real world setting right away after graduation and really apply a lot of the foundational work that I had being at the Hit Factory. Now, it's not like I got a job at the Hit Factory and I started working inside of a studio right away. I wasn't doing that. But I was able to walk into studios and really understand what everything was. I was able to point out what cables I needed. I was able to kind of point out what microphones, and I was really able to understand the different types of microphones that are out there. So it gave me, like I say, a really great foundation. And then of course you get your best experiences when you're out there working and you get put into the lion's den. Just got again, any advice for young female engineers beginning their career in audio? My advice to you is, we are working in a field that is growing in numbers for women, but we still haven't reached those big numbers yet. We're still, I think, somewhere around 7% or less of women that make up the engineering and production side in the music business. So, just understand that, you got to work hard. You got to know what you're doing. You got to know what you're saying. And have a passion for this. I think a lot of female engineers, I think they think that this is a cool job to have, right? But they don't really know everything it entails. And if you don't know everything that it entails, it's going to be hard for you to gain and grow a passion for it. So you have to be able to connect your passion with what you want to do in life. So,
it's 16 hours.
Whether it's young, whether it's old, female, male, it doesn't matter. If you want a career in audio, there is a lot of competition. And just because you're a woman doesn't mean that, let me give this girl a shot because we're living in this Me Too movement or whatever this movement is. For me, I need competent. I need people with common sense. I need people, if you're going to come work for me, I need, competent. I need people that are punctual and common sense and, I'm not expecting people to know everything when you come and work for me, or work for anywhere. Even a lot of places, if you go to work, people are not expecting you to know everything, but you got to be able to have a great idea and understanding on, what current technology is at in audio. So keep up with the times, okay? Constantly keep your mind learning. I do it all the time. And, that's just always keep yourself learning, keep yourself fresh. I do it all the time. The Sonics, favorite commercial studio apart from the legendary Hit Factory. Oh, and memorable session you had in it. Man, I've had so many, and it's so sad. So, the Sonics asked me, so what's my favorite commercial studio apart from the legendary Hit Factory? So there was a studio in New York, and it was Sony Studios, and it was actually right down the street from the Hit Factory, New York. To me, that was one of my favorite studios to work at. I mean, I remember having so many different sessions there, but there's like two that I remember in particular that were so awesome. So Sony Studios had this, and I can't remember the studio name. I forgot if they went by letters or numbers. Maybe it was Studio 3. I can't remember now. Gosh, it's been so long. And it's not there anymore. But it was the basement studio. It was the studio downstairs in the basement. And I loved it because it just kind of like cut me off from the rest of the world. But I was mixing a lot of the Diddy stuff from, what album was that? It's the album where Puff has it's just like his face with the glasses. I can't remember the name of the album. But we did a song on there called Diddy Rock. And we just had it was just a fun session. I mean, it was a fun song to mix. So when he came in to kind of listen to the mix, it was just like a dance party. It was fun. It was a great time. And then there was another time at Sony where Timberland was working with Danger, with Beyonce. No, they were working with Jay-Z. They were working with Jay-Z, but Beyonce was there. And I ended up going in there and just kind of chilling and hanging out. I wasn't working the session because I had the studio downstairs, so I had just came down and came up to just kind of chill out and just whatever. And it was just fun. It was just interesting because I'm sitting in the studio with Jay-Z and Beyonce, and I'm over here on my computer, right? I'm sitting on the couch working. This was like back in the day when I was like really broke. So like I'm on the computer trying to figure out like my money situation. I'm on like the Bank of America, or whatever the bank I was using at the time, website, looking at my accounts, trying to transfer money so things don't. It was a bad time in my life, and still trying to get my. And so all of a sudden, like I'm just like I guess I looked like I was sweating bricks, and then all of a sudden like I just kind of felt like someone like right next to me. And like I go to look, and it's like, and it's Jay-Z, and he's like, you want me to give you some advice on this? And I was just like, I don't know, I should have taken his advice, but I was so like embarrassed, I think, that I just like shut the computer. I was like, no, and I just like closed it. But we ended up having a really cool conversation after that. But I just thought like that was, I don't know, man, that studio just had magic. It just had a lot of magic. And then in LA, I had a great studio I worked out of, Chalice, where I had a lot of tons. The MIA session was done there. Just a lot of great studios I worked at. So yeah, thanks for letting me reminisce on that. That was cool. Dr. Bulab, do you have a preference on mixing engineering, depending on in the box or SSL analog? So I do love mixing on the SSL. I love mixing analog. The problem that I'm having with that is, clients tend to want to have multiple changes, and a lot of the changes are not easy to kind of bring back. So analog mixing has become very obsolete because although I can recall a board and I can kind of bring things back through paperwork and things, it takes a lot of time. And I'm also on the road a lot. So it has... over the last, 2 plus 3, almost 3 years, I've been working in the box a lot. In majority times, I've been in the box. or I do some hybrid mixing, or I'll do some mixing on the board through subgroups, like drums, keys, vocals, that kind of thing. And, you know, I just kind of hybrid in that way. But mainly I do prefer in the box just because of the flexibility, and that's really just it. For the sound, I prefer SSL analog. For the flexibility, I love working in the box, and that's just what works for me because, you know, if I'm on the road and I need to recall something, I can just, you know, bring out my setup, make changes, and let it go, you know, as opposed to like letting the client know like, oh, sorry, I can't do it right now. It's a mess. So in the box is what it is. Let me see. I want it because I know we're like, let me see. Whew. 1 second. I done did it again, y'all. I done did it again. 1 second. I scrolled up and now I lost my place. Okay, here we are. Mixed girl production. No, we did that one, right? Oh, no. How do you manage expectations and wants of an artist, producer while staying true to your style? We all know sometimes egos get in the way. That's a great question. Listen, at the end of the day, the artist producer is your client. They are the one that are paying. You know, as an engineer, as a mixing engineer, you know, you can also be the producer on the project, and if that's the case, then you have a more of a leeway of having a say. But if there is an artist, a producer, right, an A&R, and you're the engineer, you have to know your role in that, right? So obviously, you know, I don't hold the gavel in the room. I'm not going to be the one to kind of be the judge and the jury and say, no, this is the way it's going to go. You know, you kind of listen. If the artist and the producer are going back and forth on something, then maybe, you know, your advice can kind of help the situation, but you got to be really careful at that too. You know, you don't want one or the other to feel like, so you got to choose your words nicely. You know, working in this business is such a psychological game, and it's really knowing how to use your words, how to deliver, to say something. Delivery is everything. And, you know, staying true to my style. I mean, listen, I will always try to paint the picture on what I'm trying to, you know, do. And, you know, if they can agree with it, and maybe they won't. And if they won't, then, I mean, listen, they're cutting the check. So, I mean, unless they're not asking you to do something that's against your religion or against your beliefs, go and do, you know, it's their project. It's their baby. Let it be what it is, you know. But yeah, definitely a lot of egos get in the way. That's for sure. A. Smilgy. Any tips for newcomers in the industry in terms of getting new projects in, improving, or how to approach studios to get involved and learning? I mean, as far as getting new projects in, I would say, you know, just have, if you are, I mean, a newcomer, if you're a producer and you want new projects to come in, people are not going to know who you are. So have a link ready. As I was saying earlier about keeping everything short and sweet when you write emails, same thing when you send music. Don't send like 20 tracks of what you can do. You know, don't send 20 songs of songs that you've written. Send your top 3, 4. That's it. If they love your music and they want to hear more, they're going to ask for more. But if you're sending them your entire catalog and there's some great ones, some bad ones, and they start clicking on all the bad ones, how are they ever going to know which one were the great ones? Nobody's going to listen to 20 tracks. Nobody. I don't care. I'm definitely not. I won't. I don't have the time. So I always tell people, if you're going to send music in, if you want to be a part of a project, like, let me hear what you got, but let me hear it in 3 short, or not short, but three references that I can listen to, so I'll know immediately if you're right for the job, if you're right for something in the future. As far as improving, you got to go improve because you practice every single day. You have to be able to. There's no way that you could be great at your craft if you don't tackle it every single day. Every single day. You know, if you're a writer, write a song every day. If you're a producer, produce a song or two every day. If you're an engineer, grab whatever you can and mess with it. You know what I mean? Like, just start, you know, ask people that you know that are in the music, hey, can you mind if you send me a couple of sessions? I'd like to practice on mixing, and I can show them to you. Like, that's how you can maybe even pick up your next client. You never know. How to approach studios to get involved in learning. I mean, look, working at studios want to see people that are hungry, that are able to work. They're not going to hire you immediately and say, yeah, we're going to hire you so you can just, you know, learn how to work this. No, they're going to want to see that you are just, for one, have a passion for this, and two, that you are capable in doing very common sense tasks. So once they see that, like, oh yeah, with this guy or girl is no dummy, then they'll take you to the next level and take you to the next level. So on how to approach them, I mean, write them an email, keep it short, let them know that you're interested in getting a job. You know, what steps do they have to take? Okay, if you have some experience, don't write that in the email. Maybe attach a resume to it so that, hey, see a resume attached. And if they're interested, if they're in need, then they'll click on that resume and look and learn. Ishit Kuberkar. Hi Marcella, what's your go-to mix bus processor hardware plugin? Hi Ishit. Yeah, I spoke about this very early in my chat. So my go-to mix. I work on an SSL 9000, so I'll use the mix bus compressor on the board, or I'll use a 33609 Neve compressor, and then I'll follow that up behind it with EQ. If I'm using outboard gear on an EQ, I didn't say this before, but I do have a GML EQ that I'll use. If I'm using plugins, that will be the Ozone 8 or the ML 4000 DSP plugin, and I'll use like Fab Filter EQing after it, or I'll use the EQ in Ozone. Sometimes the EQ in Ozone isn't my favorite. Just depends on the song. So, you know, listen, you know what I mean? There's so many tools out there that you can use. There's not one that's, you know, what's good for me is not going to be probably great for you. Maybe it will be, but just try. I would just say try different things. Antonian Hall, do you mix your own feelings first, or do you try to think what the artist would like? Oh no, I try to do my own thing first. I definitely always try to do what I feel first. If somebody wants me to mix a song, now if the artist gives me some notes prior to me mixing, I take that into consideration, and that happens a lot too. Sometimes artists will be like, you know, I want you to do what you do. The only thing I ask is I want my vocals to have this kind of sounding effect on it, or reverb, or sound, whatever. Then you keep that in mind. Other than that, if I get no notes prior to me mixing, I'm free reign. You know, when that first reference mix comes out, I let them give me notes. They can say, hate it, love it, change this, change that, and then we go from there. The starting point is always going to be sort of what I feel like my interpretation of the song should be like in the mix. Since earbuds is the most used device for listening to music, any advice in mixing for these things? I will always reference in earbuds. Very important, because you're absolutely right. Earbuds are the most used device for listening to music. So I don't have my earbuds in this room with me now, but I will print a mix. I will listen to them on the earbuds. I have both the wireless and the wired ones. I have basic, Beats headphones. I have another pair of headphones. They're from Audio Technica. I don't think I have them. I don't know where they're at. I think my son took them, to be honest, and I don't see them. But I have different headphones that I use. I think it's important that you reference your mixes on devices that you know is used most. So most people listen to music on earbuds, on headphones, or in the car. So very important. Let me see. Devon Aviles, when you're doing parallel compression on, say, vocals, how different is the parallel processing for background vocals and main vocals? I mean, when I do parallel compression, it's literally like it's not really any different. It's just really about how much I'm bringing back into the mix, you know? So definitely probably my main box, I'm going to be bringing in a lot more of that parallel compression just because I want more of the depth of the vocal to be more upfront. And then background, you know, it's still gonna have that depth, but I'm not gonna want it not necessarily needs to be up in the front. So it won't I won't send it as much. Michael Gormley, what's day one working with a new artist for you? What's day one working with a new artist for you? Well, day one working with a new artist is if they're coming to the studio to work with me, I guess, to record. Day one is usually just day one is usually like a lot of talking, you know, getting to know one another in personality, in small talk and big talk. It doesn't really matter. You know, if it's a recording session, obviously a song needs to be written. So a lot of conversation about what they want to write about, where they're at in their life. Do they have songs already written? Do they have stuff that they want to play? Is there a direction that they specifically want to go to, or let's just see what happens? And then, yeah, I mean, usually a new artist in mixing, that doesn't really apply because day one, if I'm working with a new artist and I'm mixing, they're usually not there. They don't come until, if they want to come, they don't come until I'm done mixing. So, let's see. Aditya Srinvasan. As someone who uses a fair bit of plugins and hardware, your take on the whole software versus your take on the whole software versus hardware debate and whether you'd be okay doing mixes entirely in the box. Yes, I'm completely okay with doing mixes entirely in the box. I do love my hardware. I do think software has come a very long way, and they've emulated a lot of this hardware very much similar to what the hardware sounds like. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but, you know, software, you know, especially everything, you know, in the UAD world sounds so good. So, yeah, I do a lot of mixes in the box now. I'm working from home now in this quarantine. So obviously I don't have my SSL here. I have, you know, I work in the box. So that's where I'm at. Super basic setup, just, you know, just my Pro Tools. I have an Apollo Aero. I have my satellite UAD box. And yeah, that's my thing. One second. Yes, okay. Ahmad Sharif, thoughts on the Neumann TLM 103 mic? I don't really have a lot of, I feel like I have not used this mic probably since my Hit Factory days. So I don't have a lot of thought on that. I'm sorry, Ahmad. But if you had something more specific towards it, let me know or hit me on my on my Instagram. Cacharo de Aru, at your level of experience, how much are you using reference tracks to do your mixes? I feel like depending on references makes me a limited mixer. So I wonder what's the opinion of people like you. Okay, great question. Reference tracks. Here's the thing. I don't like to, what I'll do with reference tracks is I'll listen to the reference track in the beginning. Maybe once, twice, 3 times, that's it. I put it away. I don't listen to it again. I mix the song as I like to use it. Because you're right, it does limit you as a mixer because you start thinking like, oh wait, that doesn't sound like the reference. Oh wait, that doesn't sound like, and you don't want to get into that cluster. Like that becomes a shit show. You don't want that. What you want is to be free of your creativity of what you want the song to sound like when you mix it. I send the mix off to the client. This is where the conversation, the dialogue comes back and forth. They'll say something like, can you make the drum sound more like the reference? That's when I'll bring the reference back into play, because now what happens is a lot of clients are so used to their reference mix, to their demo, and when you try to do a dope-ass mix, they are so stuck on their little whack-ass reference mix, and now you're sitting here trying to figure out how do I, make this crap sound like, I'm not trying to mix crap. So I'm like, how do I sound this? How do I get my mix to sound as close as possible to that, or try to figure out a middle point? You know what I mean? A lot of times it's not so much of a copycat, but reference tracks, I don't use them throughout my mix. Like I said, I'll listen to them in the beginning, right before I even start touching anything. And then I put it away. And I only bring it back out if the client starts referring to, can you make it sound more like the reference? Something like that. So, Sebastian Rodriguez, around what level do you usually deliver your mixes in? I was always taught to be around 0 VU, which equals minus 20 dB. Standard VU metering, I've noticed that's kind of low. Is minus 14 metering better? I'm at minus 14. That's where I'm at. I've spoken to a lot of my mastering engineer friends, and that's, there's a lot, you get a lot of great result. After you mix, you need to also send it off to get mastered, and there's a headroom that needs to happen for them. So I'm always about minus 14 when I'm print. Mixed Girl Productions, if you were given only say $5,000 or so for in the box or outboard gear and told to mix using only the items you bought, what would you buy? Oh shit. Girl, that ain't a lot. I don't know. That ain't a lot of money. I know it is a lot of money, actually. You can buy a lot of stuff with that. What would I buy? Outboard gear. See, I don't have the prices of this in my head. I know for a fact that obviously I love to use my 33609, right? I think that's around $3,000. So it's already eating more than half of my budget. But I would probably do silver in the box or outboard gear. I would probably buy all software with that. I mean, that would be the smartest thing to use, right? I would just do everything software. I would stack up on a bunch of UAD shit, like just finding bundles that you can, get a bunch of stuff in. There's a lot of great bundles that you can get great deals in, and just kind of make the most out of that money. What specifically? I mean, you hear me talking. I mean, I like a lot of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I could buy a lot of different things. Nick Wyatt, will you still be doing the session in France? Absolutely. As soon as we can get past everything that we're going through in this world, and be safe about it, I will be back in France. Ace Migley, any tips for you? I thought I already answered that. What? Right, I answered that. I didn't get a new project. Yeah, I already answered that. What beater? What? Mike L Music. What beater on the big rap vocal chain? I don't understand your question. If you can write that back. What beater on the begging rap vocal chain, RVox or with quicker attack setup. Whoa, what's better on the rap vocal chain, RVox or R comp with quicker attack setup? I think that's what it is. What's better? What's better on the rap vocal chain? I don't know. Shit. I mean, they're both great compressors. You can use. I mean, I love the RVox. It'll bring everything. If you use the RVox, if you guys want to try this, if you haven't, put the RVox on a vocal, on a lead vocal, and bring down that threshold. Give it a quick attack, and you will see that the vocal really has a great standout presence to it. How do you improve navigating a male industry? How do you improve navigating a male industry as a female engineer? Do you read certain literature or read the room to center your mindset before sessions? Great question, Dr. Bulab. How do I improve navigating? I mean, look, as a female, I don't really think about it. I'm just an engineer. I really don't think about so much gender. I think a lot of people have put emphasis on gender, obviously in the last few years. I never, like, going through my early years in this, people would say, like, man, there's not a lot of women doing this. And I don't know, it wouldn't, like, resonate with me in any way. I was just an engineer. I just wanted to touch the console and the computer and mix records and record artists. And I wanted to be the best at it. So I really just focused on my craft. And, navigating in the male industry, obviously, like, know how to carry yourself, as a woman, you know what I mean? Like, just know when you're giving off, certain signals or vibes that might sort of put you down the wrong road, that might be, be professional, speak professionally, dress professionally. I don't think you should be dressing like you're going, to the club in a miniskirt and then recording like 50 Cent type thing, I think it's pretty self-explanatory on how you should navigate yourself. But I will say, I definitely do read the room. I do that anywhere I go anyway. I read the room anywhere I go. It's important for me because I need to know what personalities are in the room. You know what I mean? I got somebody in the room that's just being extra, just perverted. You know what I mean? Like that's gonna allow me to know like how to carry myself. If there's somebody in there that's just super, just cool and laid back, then I'm not gonna be in there like just like like I can't relax myself. You know what I mean? So. Do I read certain literature? I read all the time. I read all the time. I pick up books all the time. No rhyme or reason might be a recommendation. I go to bookstores just for the heck of it. I might like the title of a book. I pick it up. I kind of see what it's about. If I like it, great. But I don't read books to know how to act in the industry. Tebquez music. Hi, Marcella. I'm from South Africa. Which EQ do you normally use to make a vocal stand out in the mix, sound clean, present in the mix? A lot of great EQs out there. But I love FabFilter. I kind of probably overuse it. I love it. It's a really dope, the Q3 FabFilter EQ. There's also another EQ, the Diamond EQ, that I love to use. I think they're a company out of the UK. Great vocal for many things, but for lead vocals or whatnot. What's another one that I like to use? Was this a vocal question? Yeah, vocal. Another EQ that I like to use. Think. The Poltec EQ P1A is a great EQ that I love using as well. I love using it, when boosting high frequencies and the low frequencies. But on vocals, I like kind of adding that high frequency through the Poltec. Sebastian Rodriguez, is there a way to preserve dynamics and still be loud? I struggle with music that's very dynamic because I always end up choosing between loudness and overall dynamics of a song. So, I mean, you got to be careful when you don't want to use, because here's the thing, like, you don't want to lose the dynamic of a record by overcompensating with loudness. And, you just have to be really careful with that by not like over compressing. Over compressing can really lose your dynamics in a mix. So I feel like a lot of people like to just compress to bring a lot of things up loud and whatnot. A lot of times it may not even need a compressor. It's just as simple as putting up a volume knob, you know what I mean? And not really messing too much with dynamics. Dynamics are really there, as far as like a compressor. If there's a sound that just has, like, let's say there's a bass guitarist that played bass and it's just jumping all over the place, but you want to be able to get the dynamics to kind of sit in a nice range without some of it like hitting louder, some of it hitting lower. That's when you want to really use, your compression. But, you got to make sure that, you're watching, you're hearing that things are not distorting. You're watching that you're not like just throwing everything too loud, because otherwise you're not going to have a dynamic to the mix whatsoever. Everything's just going to be loud. Everything you got to think of, of sound having, different peaks and different levels to it. So everything can't just be loud. So you got to make a choice on, what in this record is going to be up front and what's going to be more sit in the back and what's going to be more felt versus heard. And like that, you can really create a nice dynamic to a song without always having so much loudness to it. So, and what I talked about earlier, when you're mixing and you sort of like bring things one by one, like that can really help you. As long as you don't start bringing everything to like the same level. Everything does not belong at the same level. Let me see what's let's see. What's Clinton? What's your approach philosophy when I thought I already did that. Yeah, I already did that. Daniel Russo, what would you say makes your mixing unique from other engineers? What is the Marcella sound? I don't know what the Marcella sound is. You guys got to tell me what the Marcella sound is. I think, I definitely have a lot of great experience from just knowledge of hip hop and R&B and dance music. I get the correlations of where vocals and low end. I just have a lot of understudy of understanding music. This goes way before my engineering years. It was just me being a connoisseur of sound and music. And once I became an engineer, I just sort of took that of what I interpreted in sound, and now I just kind of applied in my own mixes. I don't really know what other, engineers and how and a lot of the things are, but I think my sound is just, you're always going to find, a dope ass low end. You're always going to find a clarity to my vocals, and you're always going to find spacing with instruments. Like, I'm always finding fun in different ways that I can try to space sound and kind of, surprise you. Like, out of nowhere, maybe a sound might be in your left at one point, and then it'll be in the right in the next part, of the song. So I have fun, to be honest. When I mix, I really don't try to get so technical with things. I really just have fun. I really try to paint the picture with sound, and that's my canvas. One second, guys. Okay. I feel like I already spoke about that. Mike L. Music, is it okay to use auto-tune as the first plug-in on the bus vocal chain, or is it better to do it as insert plugin on every track separately. I mean, unless you want, when you're recording, you want to put it on the bus vocal chain, the first plugin on the vocal chain. That should be the first. That's what it should be going through first. And then once it's recorded through there, then great. I wouldn't go separately because it creates a lot of latency and delay, and you can really alleviate all that by just having it on an aux track and having it pass through there, and that's just what it is. So yeah. Sometimes when I get sessions in a mix, I still hear a lot of pitch problems, and I'll need to then put the auto tune obviously individually on the tracks. So yeah. I think may not be able to get through all of these. So let me just kind of, some of these are repeating themselves though. It's from the same people. Very strange. Let me move that. Scarlett's Meal. I am curious to know if you feel like you are treated any differently as a successful woman in the music industry. I think no. I'm not treated differently. I don't feel like I am. Like I said, I've been in the business now 20 years, guys. So a lot of my relationships are people that already, I've worked with already in the past, or have already known a lot of my discography and my work. So I don't think there's like a, obviously if there's somebody that's been around longer versus someone that hasn't, there's going to be a sense of someone feeling that they're getting treated differently. But that's just, I don't know if it's being treated differently versus just familiar, other people just being familiar with a person that is successful in the music industry. Yes, let's see. Carlo Escalante, did you ever find yourself cleaning everything up sonically, but then lose the vibe of the record? How did you go about making the sonic sound great without losing the vibe? I have. That has happened to me before. Like I've made everything sound super clean. I think now with what I do is I love in the recent versions of when clip gain became a part of Pro Tools capability, that really changed the game because before when I was cleaning up tracks, it would just be like I would erase it or completely mute it. But now it's like, for instance, like if I'm doing vocal takes, I'm not doing vocal. If I'm recording and I'm sorry, I'm getting all confused. If I'm mixing vocals and there's a lot of breathy parts, a lot of those parts are not necessary, but in transition for it to sound natural and not lose the vibe, a lot of times I just kind of gain it down a little bit. You know what I mean? Obviously, I could have did that with, using the volume line and just kind of drawing it in, but it's just easier with clip gain now. You know what I mean? And just kind of making sure you don't lose some of those natural little just moments that are happening in the record. Something that may feel like a mistake is probably a beautiful mistake. You know what I mean? So really just kind of figuring out, if you're not sure, don't get rid of it. Wait till you're kind of like fully done with the mix. And if it's something that's just bothering you, then get rid of it. But if it's something that's adding to the song or adding to the vibe, then there you go. Then keep it. Let's see. No, how many remixes you want to do? Knowing what you know now. I love this. I love this question. 28 and entertainment, maybe. Knowing what you know now, which one of your mixes would you want to do over? Oh my gosh, this is a great question. I honestly would love to do over The Way I Are, even though people love it. I would love to do over. I like to do everything over, to be honest. shit, I even want to do over, give me more. Like there's things in there that I hear that make me cringe. Hot as ice, like I have a lot of mixes, guys, that I would love to do over. We evolve as people, as mixers, as engineers, as whatever, all the time. So, you know, the mixer that I was in 2007 is not the mixer that I am in 2020. So it's you know, if you don't evolve as a mixer in 10 years or in 5 years or in 2 years, something isn't right. You know, and this is what I'm saying. I am a constant learner. I'm learning. I'm want to, you know, teach myself new things. So yeah, that's how you evolve. I lost. What is this? Okay. Daisy D. Marcella, I wanted to ask you for 11 years. Could you mentor me? Sure. Hit me up. Let's talk. We have to talk first. Let's talk. Let's see what you got going on. Drums, Vaso, drums mixing from drummer view or the other. I'm always mixing in the drummer's perspective. Always. Thanks. Greetings from Greece. I'm always mixing in drummer's perspective. I'm recording drums. I am labeling everything on the console in drummer's perspective. Like when I'm mixing, everything is in drummer's. Like it's just that's how like when I'm mixing and I'm panning things. A lot of times I'll pan things in drummer perspective. So, you know, something to listen for when you listen to my plugins. Chris Romero, Miami represent. What up? Let's see. Any tips for newcomers? I already answered that. I swear that's coming in a few times. Marcella or Clinton, you biggity. Which mix has been your most challenging mix? How did you overcome it? The most challenging mix. I've had a lot. That's a hard question. Not every mix is easy, and they're difficult for different reasons. I might have mixed it super easy and thought I did a great job, and then the client has me doing like 13 different revisions. You know, I remember when I did a mix for Puff many years ago. He wanted. I mixed this one song for him for 9 days. Well, I didn't mix it for 9 days. I mixed it in about 1.5 days. But he had different revisions nonstop. And it was literally 9 days before I finally got an approval. So, you know what I mean? Exhausting. I was probably close to tears at point. You know what I mean? Like you always want to make sure the clients are pleased. And sometimes it's just not, you know, it's just sort of them, you know? So, yeah. Hello, Marcella from Jay. Hello, Marcella from London, UK. Just a quick question. What was it like working with Danger, Missy, and Timberland? And what was the tip to getting Missy's stat vocal sounding so iconic? Well, what was it like working with Danger, Missy, and Timberland? I mean, I still work with Danger, so Danger's amazing. We've been working together for almost like basically my entire career, about 17 years. Working with Missy is challenging. She's a super, super, super creative woman. So her mind goes nonstop. And she's very much, when she's working, she likes to be by herself. With either just her and the engineer. So she writes her own songs, so it's not like she's in there with a bunch of different songwriters. She, you know, so it's really just, she's either in there with engineer and just producers and herself, or she's in there just by herself and the engineer while she's recording vocals. She doesn't like people in the room when she's recording. You know, her stack sound just comes from really listening to all the music that came out before I started touching her music and really just emulating that, you know, really figuring out, like, you know, you figure it out, you know, and a lot of times she'll help you too. Like if you do a rough mix, she'll say, can you bring backgrounds up? Can you do this? Can you bring the harmonies up? You know, and that's the type of dialogue that happens between her and the engineer, or producers and artists in general. And then working with Tim, I mean, Tim is amazing. Like the guy is, you know, he's not from this planet. So he's a lot of fun to work with. He's very animated. He loves to joke around. He's constantly listening to different beats in his head, and he's just fun, super fun. Emmanuel, there's one more question that's been worrying me. What do you think about to drop some unreleased tracks or instrumentals? I bet you and Nate have a huge amount of great stuff. Hundreds and hundreds. We do, and I always talk to Nate about this. Nate, I always tell Nate, man, we got one of these days we're gonna drop a lot of stuff. Trust me, because we have a vault of hard drives that's just full of music that's never been released. So yeah, we'll figure it out. And J Main, thank you. Yes, Press Play was the album, the Diddy album that I worked on, that the Sony Studios, the song that I did Diddy Rock on, that I had such an amazing time working at Sony Studios in this super iconic studio. No longer there. They bulldozed it down. Sucks. Hate it. Womp. Teb Quick Music. Hi, Marcella. What's the difference between mixing with the normal EQ? I guess example SSL EQ versus the MS Brainworks. I don't use the Brainworks EQ, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what that EQ is or does. I have it. I don't even use it. So, I mean, the SSL EQ, it's familiar. I mean, I know it. It has a great, you know, sound to it, so I use it. Yeah. Let's see. What is the biggest mistake in mixing a song that you would never do again, that you never do once again? And this is from Sling Sound Studio. The biggest mistake. The biggest mistake. No, I don't know. What's the biggest mistake I've ever done mixing a song? I don't know. Probably not putting enough focus in it, I guess. I don't know. And then like thinking I'm done and I'm not. I really don't know. Oh, I know what it is. I'll tell you. It's not even anything technical, because this is what I don't do anymore. So mixing to me is very, very personal, very cerebral, very emotional. And what I don't like to do is mix when I'm having a bad day. And I know it sounds like, wait, what? When I'm having a really bad day, you know, when I'm mixing and I'm touching people's music, I want to be able to give it the best energy possible. And what I've noticed is the days that or the times that I've ever came in trying to just work through something that I'm going through in life, and I'm just really not having a great day or a good week or whatever it is, the outcome is terrible. Like it's almost like I have injected poison into the song and it just sounds bad. Like the EQ is all wrong. Everything is just off. Everything is just off. And so what I've learned is when I'm able to recognize that I'm just not there mentally, I just don't mix at all. I don't come in, you know, and I don't have many days like that, you know what I mean? But, you know, we're all human, right? We have good days, bad days. So that mistake of me trying to, I guess, mask what I'm going through and just trying to just mix someone's song just so I can get through it and get past it so I can get paid. No, I love what I do. I love mixing. So, I don't do that to myself. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't do that no more. So, da-da-da. In the box is today's trend. Yes, it is. Do I use a controller from Jerry Corti? Not necessarily, but I do have a Raven that I do use. I don't necessarily use it as a like I use it's funny, like I have the MTZ2 in my studio, and I don't really use it until the very end when I'm done with the mix, and I need to do little like I'll listen to the mix from the back of the room from a different perspective instead of the engineer's chair. So when I'm sitting in the back of the room, I have my Raven right next to me, and depending on how I hear things in that perspective, I'll make subtle changes from the Raven, so I don't have to get up from the back of the room, walk to my computer that's in the front of the room, make the changes, and come back, because then I'll lose perspective. So I kind of use the Raven only in that way, but I don't use a controller. No, everything is just my mouse. Vince producer in Pro Tools, while two audio tracks are routed to the same bus, the DAW sometimes ducks the audio of one track while the other is playing. Do you experience with that issue? Let me read this question again, Vince producer. And while two audio tracks are routed to the same bus in the DAW, it sometimes ducks the audio of one track while the other is playing. I'm not familiar with having an issue like this whatsoever, so no. Young Kai, trap song, vocal reverb. Trap songs can be, the reverb that I use on it, it can be, there's a plate reverb that I like to use on the EMT 140. It's a UAD plugin. I think it's called Plate of Shrimp. Try that. Plate of Shrimp. It's something shrimp. So if you see the shrimp in that plugin, I like to use that reverb. So try that. You're welcome, Dr. Bulab. Sin City Productions. Do you think someone over the age of 34 still has a chance to establish a music career, whether it being a producer, engineer, or artist in a youth-driven industry? It depends on the music. It depends on what's the music, what's your genre of music. I think anybody can be a producer or an engineer. Obviously artists, we do know it's a very youth-driven industry. I think the only reason why producers have or people look at producers as a youth-driven is because, and I'll be very honest with you guys, it's because the youth are very easily taken advantage of. And, as opposed to someone that has a lot of clout or a lot of, just knowledge just because they're an adult or, experience. Very hard for a record label to tell them that they're only going to pay them like $500 for a track. But then you tell like a 19-year-old, hey, we got $700 for your track. When you know damn well you should be paying them a lot more. So I think it's become a very youth-driven industry because I just think it's a lot of people taking advantage of the younger generation, and it's sad. But no, I don't think you can still establish a music career being an engineer after 34. You definitely can be an engineer after 34 as a producer. And as an artist, I think it just depends on the genre, you know what I mean? But I think it's possible, absolutely. I think it's definitely possible. Have you ever mixed a 2-track, and what's your approach? I mean, yes, I've mixed from Joshua Carlson. I've mixed a 2-track before. There's not much you can really do with a 2-track, you know what I mean? Other than kind of, depending on what the 2-track sounds like. A lot of times if it's a 2-track, it's already been printed with some stuff that's on it, like some compression or whatever. But if you feel like it needs, some loudness to it, then, definitely give it some compression. There's nothing, it's a 2-track. And it's very hard. Like, I'm not a mastering engineer. Mastering engineers are like this is like their world. They work on 2 tracks. Like I work on multi-tracks. So for me to think, how do I mix with a 2-track? It's very difficult because that's all I have. So if that's all you have, which I've been given that in the past, I've been given like a 2-track of music and everything else vocals, or vice versa. I've been given like, 2-track music and maybe like, the vocals is a lead 2-track and a background 2-track. There's nothing you can really do with that. There's no blending. You know what I mean? All you can do is really just take those parts and just kind of make it fit where it fits. And it is what it is. Andriana. Hi, Marcella. Thank you for this Q&A. How much compression do you use? Or do you automations, or do you do automations then compress? Is 5 dB to 7 dB of compression too much for your ears? Much love from South Africa. Much love to you too. It's not a really concise question because everything, you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're compressing. So even if you say how much compression do you use on a guitar, I don't know. I mean, I can give you a range, but no, 5 to 7 dB of compression is not too much for my ears, depending on what you want the outcome to be. You know what I mean? All automation I do after compression. That's something that I do at the very end. Automation is probably one of the very last things that I do. But it's a very hard question to use or to answer because I'm just like, how much compression do I use on vocals, on what? And it doesn't, even if you tell me on what, it's a question that would really have to be if you're sitting next to me and you're hearing me mixing and you say, hey, how much compression did you put on that bass? I saw, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. But it's not, it's too open-ended for me to answer like this. Nadir Kahari, hello Marcella, hope you are both healthy and safe where you are. I'd like to know what's your approach to creating separation in a busy mix, the way you put reverb and delay into place. So, I mean, creating separation in a busy mix, I spoke about this earlier, making sure you are, using tools that create different dimensions of your sounds. Panning everything in maybe everything should not be all in the same place, meaning hard right, hard left. Everything should not just be up the middle. Kind of give your mix, your sounds some real estate in different places. And then some of the tools that I've been using, are like the S1 Imager, Mondo Mod, Pan Man. And then as far as like the way you put reverb and delay into place, I really it just depends on am I doing it more for for depth, or am I doing it for like an effect? Like I want it to just be this big grand sound of reverb and delay just going off. So it just really depends. You have to make that decision based on what song you're working on. So, I may start off maybe just sending a little bit of reverb, and then seeing if that sounds like, or I might just completely max it out and then slowly bring it down until I feel like, I like where this sits, and then see where that is in your mix. And as far as delay, you gotta be very careful with delay. I mean, I hear people's mixes that they are just, they use too much delay, and it makes almost like motion sickness in a mix. So you got to be really careful with delay. You're welcome, Scarlett's Meal. William Clark, I lost a great client by mixing on a bad day. Learned that lesson the hard way. Yeah, for sure. You're welcome, Emmanuel. What can producers do to make your job easier before sending a track to be mixed? Thanks for your time. Great question.
It's 17 hours.
Great question. So basically, just making sure you take whatever you're using in your DAW as a producer, if you're using FL Studio, if you're using Ableton, if you're using Logic, whatever you're using, unless you want that sound to be married the way that you produced it, like if you're just adding compressors and EQs on stuff just because you want it to sound good for you, when you send it out to a mixer, please take that all off, because a lot of times I receive music from producers and everything's already processed. So it's impossible for me to do my job the way that I can do it at its best. You know, if something already has processing on it, and then here I'm getting the files and I'm putting more processing on it, what do you think is going to happen? It's just, you know, I'm not going to get the most out of that sound. And the mix is going to sound not big. It's not going to sound grand. So I think producers need to be really wary on when they send stuff. Like I say, if it's a sound, right, that you're like, you put this special EQ on there, special EQ, right, and a really cool reverb, leave the EQ on, print it as such, right, because I know it's a special EQ. And I say special meaning, like, let's say you pass the sound through like a telephone EQ, right? So that everybody understands. A telephone EQ, very small bandwidth, right? That's a special EQ. So print that EQ. Print the reverb separately on a separate track. Don't print, you know, that reverb on it, you know, and just make sure it's labeled, you know, whatever the reverb sound is, you know, guitar reverb or, you know, guitar EQ, you know, make sure everything is really labeled so that we know what's going on. I hope that was helpful. In Benjamin, what song did you work with Tiesto and how was it? Tiesto, I worked on the Kaleidoscope album. I worked on a few songs. It was fun. I mean, working with Tice was amazing. I mean, it's probably one of the best times that I had. In I mean, if I were to write a book about my life, Tiesto's time with working with him and hanging with him was probably one of the best. It's amazing. And even when I see him today, it's just like, you know, it's amazing. And Miro Vaz, Ola from Brazil, what is your approach to treat bass guitar while recording and after while mixing? Any favorite chain? Bass guitar. So as far as treating bass guitar, I mean, I always, it's funny because I kind of use, when I'm recording bass guitar, I use the 1176 or a distressor while I'm recording it. And then while I'm mixing it, if let's say I didn't record it and I'm mixing a bass guitar, I'm usually putting a the 1176 with the Renaissance X, and then some EQ if needed. But it's kind of like the 1176 and or the distressor, not and. It's either the 1176 or the distressor. Hardware and software is kind of what I use on the bass guitar. Discovering that my all-time favorite song of MIA Bad Girls is mixed by a woman, and that a woman is so empowering. Thank you for that and your time today. Oh, from Brussels. You're welcome, Diana D. Okay, I'm going to answer two more, guys, because I do have to get off of here and I have to actually get to work. So let me just, Evil Morty, Mixing in the Box. I just lost myself. Did you happen to use Mixing in the Box? Did it ever happen to you to use very few plugins? Sometimes I feel like we put some plugins on a track because we have to, even though the track needs very little treatment. Yes, absolutely. I try to be very conscious. It's crazy that sometimes like I'll open people's sessions and there is like every track has like 5 plugins on everything, and it's like, what is happening and why? Like I don't get it. Like what is the purpose of all this, right? And it's insane. So yeah, when I'm mixing, I try to be very like subtle, like a compressor if I need it, or maybe just an EQ, you know, maybe just distortion. Like I'm very subtle. And then sometimes, yeah, some sounds, some songs and mixes do require a lot more, plugins. So, but I agree with you. I feel like a lot of people just feel like they can just do it because because you can, and although you can, it doesn't make it right. You know what I mean? So, got to be really you got to be very, very just less is more. Just remember that less is more when you mix. So the more stuff you're putting on, the more processing. Like, is it necessary? You have to ask yourself these questions. Not just do it because you saw it being done or being heard somewhere. Just like I want everybody on here that is working on their music to be very mindful on their sound, on what they're trying to achieve. So, um, yeah. Um, I know, J Main. I do need a glass of water. Actually, I need a glass of wine because it is 5 o'clock here, and I am very tired. One last question. Let me see. Just oh, my goodness, this thing is moving. Mixed by Tone. When did you know you would be able to make a career from mixing? Um, when did I know? I knew I wanted to do it when I started assisting, being an assistant engineer with Jimmy Douglas, and watching him work and kind of seeing you know, what the outcome of mixing a record does. I knew that's what I wanted to do. When did I know I was going to make a career of it? So I started working with Carrie Hilson when she got signed to Timberland back in 2004. And she was a new artist signed to Mosley Music, which was Timberland's record label company, and Interscope Records. And Carrie, myself, and Danja, we were always working on our own, like in another studio. We were just kind of creating music. We were doing our thing. And then it was, we wanted to, I had to create rough mixes with everything we worked on. So when I had to play these rough mixes for Timberland and for Polo the Don, which was her other producer that she was signed to, she, they would hear these mixes and they would be like, damn, like you got Carrie's vocal sounding right, and damn, you got this shit hitting. Da, da, da. So, Danger knew very early on that I had a good knack for mixing. I had a great ear. I was mixing his like instrumental tracks for maybe about a year before all this, or no, maybe less than a year. And so when Polo and Tim kind of started saying it, well, then Danger gave me my first mixing opportunity working on a record for Usher. It was a movie soundtrack. The soundtrack was called In the Mix, and the song was called Hands and Feet. And please don't look up this song. It's so embarrassing. And yeah, that was my first mix. And after that, Carrie started taking me on the road with her, working in Atlanta with her, and things were just like, it just took off from there. And I just, Danger just believed in me so much, and Timberland believed in me, Polo believed in me, and I just started really mixing for them. They would just start shooting me work. So that's it was around 2005, 6, where I really knew this is the career that I'm going to go after. So, anyway, I thank you guys. This was fun. We've been on this for over 2 hours, and I hope you guys, enjoyed. And, much love. I will be sending on my Instagram those snapshot pictures if you guys are interested in the template of my workflow on how I set up a session during a mix. And yeah, I'll probably put that up in the next few hours, so be on the lookout for that. It's going to be on my story. So, you know it's only going to be up there for about 24 hours. So be on the lookout, and everybody stay safe. Thank you guys for coming and joining me. This was fun. Hopefully we can do it again, or I can meet many of you guys in France. Okay? Take care.
Thank you, Marcella. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Okay.
Thanks so much.